Welcome back, everybody. So today we are going to be talking about markets, economics, India and Pakistan, tariff escalations between the US and China, the bond market, the stock markets, and everything else in between. Now, if you are new here, please make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe. I do reply to every single comment. So if you do have a question, if you do have a comment, I do read absolutely everything. So please leave it in the comment section down below. I would massively encourage people to leave comments because I think it's how we all learn and grow. Now, I just want to talk about something what I've been receiving a hell of a lot just in regards to the tariff escalations on the film and media, let's say TV production sectors, and why would the administration basically be imposing tariffs on them sectors. Now, I am not going to rehash in terms of what I've been talking about over the past couple of weeks just in regards to fiscal dominance, everything like that, because I know it can be a little bit boring, obviously, me talking about this over and over and over and over again, but I am aware that 50% of people who do watch these videos, this is the first video of what you've seen, so I would massively encourage you to go and watch some other videos just in regards to what I'm kind of talking about in regards to my thesis, just in regards to fiscal dominance and what the current administration and the Federal Reserve is currently doing to basically destabilize a lot of these other countries. Now, the reason why I think the administration is imposing tariffs on the film and media production is because of the influence of what foreign entities have on film and media production. So I like to see the film industry as basically the marketing arm of that specific country. So now typically what you'll see is that when a film gets produced in the United States or in China, them films typically showcase strength or dominance from a military perspective or from a technological perspective, what ultimately is trying to showcase that they have the best technology and obviously military equipment, blah, 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 blah. Now, if you think about where the film industry is over the last, let's say, 30 years, from where films used to be, let's just name some classics, right? I mean, we've got Lethal Weapon, Die Hard, Terminator 2, you know what I mean? All these really, really, really good films, probably would not get created today. And there's a lot of reasons why these films would not get created today. And that is probably because of the ideologies of, let's say, foreign actors in regards to specific types of agendas, right? Like they want to have a film what is created in a specific way. It needs to have, obviously, let's say, tick a lot of boxes, blah, 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 blah. And this is probably why we see not as much interest in terms of watching films as before. So, again, I typically see the film industry as the advertising arm of that specific country. And again, I think there's very, very, very good reason why the administration would want to impose these tariffs on obviously foreign entities in regards to investing in the film industry, because you wouldn't necessarily want a foreign entity influencing how films and media is produced, because obviously that would have large implications in how people think in regards to, let's say, policy, governance, monetary policy, fiscal policy, etc., etc., etc. So I think that is very much the reason why, and why we are currently seeing Western values being tested on every single level. And I know I've said this before, but you can kind of see this playing out in the bond market, where we are basically trying to figure out who is going to be the next global leader for the next, let's say, 25, 50. So I think this is obviously packaged up as tariffs, but ultimately it's being packaged up as influence. You want to be stopping, let's say, foreign influence in media production, what obviously creates a lot of civil unrest. Now, just on civil unrest, we have seen a lot of escalations in Pakistan and India over the past couple of days, and I think the timing of this is incredibly, incredibly interesting. Now, I'm not going to get into the specifics of India and Pakistan and the whole history there, but the reason why I find it incredibly interesting is because over the past, let's say, weeks and months, we have seen a large trend in regards to moving manufacturing from China into India. And as a result, obviously, there's a lot of financial stress in the Chinese financial sector, and there's a lot of things going on in other different types of neighboring countries like Malaysia. I'm currently in Malaysia at the moment, Vietnam, Thailand, etc. There's a lot of financial stress, and a lot of that is being imposed on these countries from a fiscal perspective. What is the Federal Reserve in terms of making sure that they do not necessarily cut interest rates, but ultimately destabilizes a lot of these countries. Now, I just find the timing just incredibly, incredibly interesting, because as countries start to move their manufacturing base from, let's say, China to India, and then India in the last week has massively escalated tensions between themselves and Pakistan. Obviously, what do you think that would do for business? Now, am I saying that China has a lot of involvement in this? Obviously that can be quite subjective, but I just think it's very, very, very convenient how this is happening at this time. Now, if you just think about the type of apps, what can kind of influence people's thinking from a, let's say, news perspective. Obviously, you've got Instagram, right? You've got Instagram, YouTube, you've got TikTok, etc., etc., etc. Now, what you've got to think about is obviously who creates these apps, and can these, let's say, countries have any influence in terms of how people specifically think in specific jurisdictions and specific areas of the world, right? And I think this is the reason why we saw a lot of backlash from TikTok just in regards to the administration a few months ago. And I think the main reason for that is because of foreign influence. Like foreign influence, you could kind of, let's say, change what people see on different types of feeds depending on specific demographics. I mean, obviously it's very, very difficult to actually see if that is the case, but the reason why I want to kind of bring this up is because of just how quickly the escalations between Pakistan and India have escalated, and obviously what that would mean from a Chinese perspective, because just a couple of weeks ago, everyone is moving manufacturing away from China, and then let's say in the past couple of days, we've seen these tensions massively escalate. Now, there's going to be some companies who are going to be thinking twice about moving their production to India on the basis of a war breaking out. And you would kind of keep your manufacturing and production in China. Now again, I know what I'm kind of saying can sound a little bit of a tinfoil hat theory, but again, from a geopolitics standpoint, I think it could be quite tactical from a Chinese perspective in terms of influencing different levels of conflicts, because you would want to encourage these conflicts, what ultimately makes people stay in China from a manufacturing perspective. What I know, there's a lot more complexity to all of this, right? Obviously the implications with the history between Pakistan and India, etc., etc., etc. But I know me talking about these things can be incredibly emotional, especially if you have relatives in Pakistan or have relatives in India. But I'm just trying to put myself in the position of China by wearing the Chinese hat, by wearing the American hat, by wearing the European hat, and just seeing what they could be thinking just in regards to monetary fiscal policy, and also escalations in regards to tariffs, because ultimately everything is going to be packaged up very, very differently, but it's how people behave and the actions of people what ultimately drives the world, right? So again, I am just looking at this from a Chinese perspective. I'm just thinking that this is quite good for business if I am China. I know even me saying that can be quite emotional for a few different people, but again, I mean, I'm just thinking about it from a business perspective, and obviously from a Chinese perspective as well. And I do think it could be very, very good that there is a lot of escalations in India and Pakistan, just from a Chinese perspective, from obviously economic growth and obviously making sure that the business does not leave China. Now, just on the Chinese economy, China has recently cut interest rates, what wouldn't be surprising, and they've also stimulated in their economies by basically, I think it's about 150 billion, they have stimulated their economy, and obviously this has a massive impact on the inflation rates, obviously currency debasement, etc., etc., etc. Now, over the past couple of weeks and months, I have been kind of talking about how there's a significant stress in the financial sector of China, and there's probably going to be contagion across other different types of countries, and that is one of the reasons why I am currently in Malaysia, because I'm trying to figure out, let's say, distressed assets at obviously good prices. I'm just trying to build out them relationships at the moment. But again, China is stimulating and weakening its currency. And the reason why they would want to weaken their currency is because it massively attracts capital to flow back into China. From an export perspective, I mean, obviously if you export a lot of goods, you don't necessarily want your currency, you don't necessarily want a very strong currency, because obviously if you do have a very strong currency, it's going to massively affect your exports. Now, what I also have found incredibly interesting over the past couple of days is just what has been going on in regards to the Taiwanese dollar. And the Taiwanese dollar has basically jumped about 10% like overnight. And again, I find this incredibly interesting, because what would that mean for countries who are importing goods and services from Taiwan? It basically means that these goods and services now are roughly 10% more expensive in relation to their own currency. That's if their own currency is not necessarily having a problem. Now, if you look at what countries does Taiwan export to, you'll see a lot of it goes to China. And when you start to factor in the amount of stress in the financial system in China, plus the implications of a strong Taiwanese dollar, it's not really good for Chinese business and the Chinese economy when these things happen. Now, again, if you start to think what is manufactured and what is created in Taiwan. But what is also interesting is what countries does Taiwan export to, and the main trading partner is China. Now, again, if you look at what Taiwan mainly manufactures, they mainly manufacture semiconductors as well as chips. Now, again, do I think this is incredibly tactical? Yes, I think there is a lot of things going on under the surface. Well, again, the headlines are telling you one thing, but when you start to look at capital flows, when you start to look at the bond market, when you start to look at, all of these other different types of markets, you can start to see there is so much stress in the sovereign debt market, and countries are basically stepping in and liquidating their assets to basically stabilize their own currencies. Now, obviously, with the Taiwanese dollar basically breaking out by basically becoming incredibly stronger, that would have, again, so many implications from a Chinese perspective, but also as well, I mean, you've just got to think, what would that mean from a US perspective as well? And that is something what I'm trying to think more about, because again, I do think that this is all very, very, very intentional to get manufacturing back to the United States, what then ultimately drives people back into the long end of the yield curve, meaning that people are going back into 10-year, 20-year, 30-year treasury notes, what ultimately brings the cost of capital down for the United States, what allows them to basically manufacture a lot of their goods and services in the United States and on very, very, very cheap money. But again, I found the strength of the Taiwanese dollar just very, very interesting, and it's just something what I thought I would mention because not many people were actually talking about it. I saw some things on Bloomberg and on the FT was basically just saying that some of it is to do with hedge funds, but again, I am looking at it from a perspective from a United States perspective, obviously from a Chinese perspective, and again, it's like if the Taiwanese dollar strengthened by 50% overnight, you can probably guess that the United States probably had something to do with it. And again, the escalations between India and Pakistan, you can pretty much guarantee that China probably had some influence there because, again, as people start to look at other suppliers in India, if there's a war going on in India, you wouldn't necessarily move your manufacturing there. So again, these are just things what I found very, very, very fascinating. Now, just in regards to the stock market and the Fed, I do think that the Fed is not going to cut rates. I've kind of been talking about this for the past couple of weeks and months, but I don't think they are going to be cutting rates anytime soon. I think they are just going to be data dependent. I think that's probably I think that is the terminology what we are going to be seeing. And again, the reason for that is because with them staying strong, it basically destabilizes a lot of these other nations, what ultimately bleeds them of their assets, what typically is US Treasury bills, gold, Bitcoin, or whatever, and they are forced to liquidate to basically stabilize their economies. Now, again, China has cut interest rates and obviously stimulating what would obviously weaken their currency. Currency spread of the CNY, CNH spread is still significantly elevated. It jumped 2 to 3% today alone. So again, they will have to intervene by basically selling something. Are they going to sell US Treasury bills, gold, Bitcoin, or whatever? And again, you can start to see that they typically might sell one specific asset, meaning that they might sell a lot of gold. I kind of anticipated that a couple of weeks ago and did exceptionally well from it. But again, I think there might possibly be a blend, meaning that they might sell, let's say, some treasury bills, some gold, some obviously Bitcoin, if they are wanting to sell some Bitcoin or whatever. But again, it's not necessarily, when the CNY, CNH spread starts to break out significantly, that they have to sell one specific asset class. Obviously, you just put yourself in their position, right? And again, this is what I keep talking about, is wear them hats. I mean, if you're new here and you keep hearing me talking about hats, it's because I mentioned a book called Six Hats for Business Management. It's a really interesting book, but basically it talks about how you can wear different types of hats to see different people's points of view, and you try and put yourself in their shoes, what ultimately makes you think like them. So when I talk about wearing different hats, that is what I am implying, that you try and put yourself in their position rather than being very biased from a United States perspective or from a European perspective or whatever. But again, the main thesis of all of this is that the United States is going to hold the line, and it would basically force the rest of the world to basically pick the next global leader. And you can start to see this playing out in credit markets. Now, again, I'm not going to talk about all of this fiscal dominance, blah, 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 blah. If you want to see that video, I would massively encourage you to go and check out the other videos on this channel. And yeah, and just finally, just touching on the stock markets. The stock markets is coming up to areas of resistance. I know I was talking about this previously, just in regards to the 200-day moving average, the 100-day moving average, the 50-day moving average. I'll put that on the screen now so you can kind of see it. But we have touched these moving averages, and I was kind of anticipating that we would break down from them. Now I do think we are not necessarily going to be going to all-time highs anytime soon. But again, I just find these areas of support and resistance when it comes to moving averages very, very fascinating. And the reason why I don't think we're going to all-time highs anytime soon is just because of everything what I'm kind of talking about, right? I think there's a lot of other things at stake rather than just money, and what is basically sovereignty and the entire Western stack from a value perspective, social perspective, and absolutely everything. So I think there's a lot more important things to be discussing rather than just the monetary aspect of the stock market. And again, I think Trump and the administration are willing to have short-term pain for long-term gain. And but again, this is just me kind of distilling my thoughts and obviously sharing it with you guys just in terms of how I'm assessing the current market setup. Now, hopefully the microphone has been pretty good. Obviously, being in Malaysia, I'll probably do a video on Malaysia because it is a very, very, very good country. But there's a lot of pros and there's a lot of cons as well. It's like anywhere, right? But one of the biggest things about Malaysia is that at night, for some reason, there's so many motorbikes in Kuala Lumpur. I mean, it's just unbelievable. Like, so many people just race around the streets. And the thing is, I've been coming to Kuala Lumpur, well, Malaysia, for the past couple of years. And, it's just every single night, everyone's just racing each other. So again, it's probably the only city I've been in the world where everyone races at night. I just think it's part of the culture that they really like motor racing or something like that. I have been to a motor racing GP before in Malaysia, what was really, really good. So I would massively encourage that if you do visit Malaysia, if you do visit Kuala Lumpur, that you go to the motor racing GP. It is a very, very cool experience if you've not experienced anything like that. But anyway, to the 4 people who keep on supporting me, I hope you're having a lovely day and take care. Bye-bye.